Hi, this is Peter Russo for the Luxury Travel Podcast, and today I have with us our host for the Luxury Travel Podcast, Charles Greenberg, our travel agent of choice. And today, Charles, what are we going to be talking about?
Hi, Peter. Great to be with you. Today, we're going to talk about an element of cruising that, for a lot of people, cruising is complicated. And I'd like to share with the viewers today 10 questions that I'll ask to make sure that somebody who's contemplating a cruise has a great experience. So the topic of today's talk will be questions I'll ask to help you choose the perfect cruise.
That is so darn important because, I think a lot of people, before we get into the program, I'd like to just weigh in. I know a lot of people just pick a cruise. I mean, I'd have just picked a cruise, right? And you get lucky or you get unlucky, and that's your cruising experience, and you never go back again. So this is very timely.
No, that's exactly right. The funny thing is that even though I'm a travel agent, I'm the first one to admit that if somebody is planning a trip from point A to point B, or if they just need a hotel room for a night or a few nights, you really don't need a travel agent because you can go online and you can book that yourself and get a very good deal and be satisfied with the results. But for a trip that's more complicated, where there are lots of different options, either a land tour on which you're visiting many cities, or on a cruise, it's really a good idea to use a travel agent. And today we'll talk about why a travel agent can take some of the confusion out of it with my 10 questions.
Well, let's get into them. I'm excited by it.
Okay, let's start with question number one. Real basic stuff. Where do you want to go? Once was a time that most cruise ships sailed in the Caribbean. It was actually before 9/11. After 9/11, there are many, many other ports that have opened up for cruise travel. So for some people, they want to go sightseeing. They want to see archaeological sites. They want to see a piece of history. They want something that's educational. For other people, they work hard during the year and they want something that's relaxing and fun in the sun. And then there's a hybrid of that where people want a little bit of the educational side and a little bit of enjoying the beaches. Now, picking my first question about what you'd like to do is real basic. Where does the ship go? And there are some cruise lines that have a specialty in certain areas. For example, Alaska, for those of us who live on the West Coast, is an incredibly popular ports of call to visit. And there are a couple of cruise lines that have a specialty in Alaska. They're really strong. To name them, Princess Cruises and Holland America. They have a very strong presence. That's not to say the other cruise lines that go to Alaska don't do a good job, but if you want to go to a certain destination, a good travel agent will help you find the right ship to get you there. That's question number one. Where do you want to go? Question two, real basic also, that goes along with where do you want to go? How long do you want to be away for? Most cruises are about 7 nights, but you don't have to stick to that. If you'd like to have a 10-night cruise, they're certainly available. At one end of the spectrum, there are these short weekend cruises where somebody says, I'm just tired, I need a getaway. I'm going to leave on Friday afternoon and come back on Monday morning. For that weekend, I don't want to clean, I don't want to cook, I don't want to worry about things. And then after the ship returns on Friday morning, they get ready and it goes back out again the ship comes back on Monday morning and then goes out again Monday night, comes back on Friday morning. So those 3 and 4 night cruises are available. And one more time at the other end of the spectrum, for people who have the time to spend, there are luxurious round the world trips, which can last 100 days or even longer at sea. Wow. And that's a great way to go. So the question is, how long a time does a person want to be away? There are some cruise lines, such as Royal Caribbean and Carnival and Norwegian, that offer these shorter cruises that are uh, easy to get away to.
Yeah, Charles, if you've never cruised before, how would you know how long you want to go for? Is there a rule of thumb there?
Well, I tend to recommend, that's a great question, Peter. I tend to recommend that somebody who hasn't cruised before and they've heard their friends say cruising is wonderful, all the attributes of cruising, like not having to decide where you're going to have your meals tonight, knowing that if you're visiting a strange port, you're in a different land, and you're worried about the sanitation in the restaurants, you're coming back to a clean restaurant. The idea of going to sleep at night and you wake up in the morning and your hotel has moved, and that doesn't happen with a Hilton or a Hyatt very often.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, except in Napa, but that's another story.
That's right. Cruises to Napa, don't take them.
That's right. So people who hear about the joy of cruising and haven't cruised, they're somewhat skeptical about whether they would enjoy it or not. That's part of the reason why I developed these 10 questions. But for those people, to specifically answer your question, I recommend a short cruise. Why don't you go out for a Friday night cruise that gets back on Monday morning? It's certainly not the most luxurious cruise in the world, but it gives you a taste of what it's like to be on a ship. And that, if you're like most people, somebody who samples that kind of a cruise, they'll come back for more.
Yeah, I did one of those, as a matter of fact, on my second wife. Our little honeymoon was the John, I think you just talked about, that leaves Long Beach or so and jumps down to Ensenada and back, and it was interesting. Of course, then we got into a storm and had to get offshore for a while, and but it was fascinating. Gosh, what a great thing to do. But I digress. I'm sorry. What's next?
Yeah, that's okay. So at this point, we want to know where you'd like to go, how long you'd like to travel for, and then a really important question is, how about your budget? How much money do you want to spend on the trip? Because a good travel agent will be able to go through his database of cruises and pick out something that's consistent with your budget. He'll work within the parameters of your budget.
They're not all the same price?
No, they're not all the same price, and no more than
as a consumer, I wouldn't have known that.
Yeah, the Ritz-Carlton is not the same as a Holiday Inn, and
it's not. Oh, but come on, Charlie.
Yeah. It's good. It's very good. All these years I've been paying so much. So here are the factors that go into cost. First of all, let's talk about the cruise line. The mass market cruise lines, the ones I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Carnival, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian. Those are the big guys in that area, and they have voyages that are, you can get on a ship for as little as about $349, $399 for a week.
Are you kidding?
For real.
Wow.
Now, that's in the off season,
right?
And it's not going to be a balcony cabin. It's going to be something less than that. As a matter of fact, since we're talking numbers, I saw a cruise this week that was advertised 4 days from Los Angeles, Long Beach,
right,
for $179. I don't think we can live at home for $179 for 4 days. Again, entertainment, meals, transportation, all of that is included in that.
Wow.
So the mass market cruise lines, they've got these great prices, especially at this time of year. The time between Labor Day and Thanksgiving is a sort of the soft season for cruise lines. The same cabin, same ship, prices will go up right as we approach Christmas holidays. Now, let's talk about the other end of the spectrum. There are companies like Crystal, Regent Seven Seas, or Seabourn, where it's not uncommon for a guest to pay $1,000 per day per person. But that kind of a cruise is a very different experience from the ones we're talking about. Many more inclusives, very often no tipping is allowed, alcohol is included with dinner. Oftentimes the shore excursions are included, and the quality of the service. A couple of weeks before the cruise begins, you'll get an email or a letter in the mail that says, how would you like us to stock your in-room bar? And when you get to your room, the drinks of your choice are there waiting for you. So the first thing we'll look at to keep the budget is to make sure that that you're on the right cruise line. Secondly, the cabin. There's a wide range of cabins on board the ship. The prices that you see advertised, which include the prices I threw out a couple of minutes ago, $179, $349, those would be for the lowest level cabin. And that would be an inside cabin at one end of the ship or the other, either all the way forward or all the way aft. But you're on the ship, and once you're on board the ship, you have the full run of the ship. There are no classes on the vast majority of the ships. Inside, just to make sure that that's understood, inside means there's no window. Now, some people would say, gee, that's claustrophobic, and others might say, you know, I'm only going to be in the room to sleep, and I'm not looking out of the window when I'm sleeping. I'm going to sleep, I'm going to shower, I'm going to change my clothes, so I want to get the best deal that I can. And I do have a lot of clients who think that way. Mm-hmm. So just remember, the price that you see advertised is often for the lowest price. Let's take it up a notch in terms of the cabin. Above an inside cabin is a cabin with a window. That's an ocean view outside cabin. Above that, there's a cabin that has a veranda, which is wonderful. You can step out and really enjoy the ocean. You can take your meals out on your veranda. Less important for something like a transatlantic crossing because the view doesn't change. Much more important for a cruise to Alaska, where the view of the majestic scenery of Alaska is so important. And then finally, above the veranda level cabins are mini suites and suites, which give you a lot more room. Some of the ships, including the mainstream brands that I've mentioned before, Royal Caribbean and Carnival, they have family suites on board that can handle as many eight people, wow. 2 bathrooms or a bath and a half. So that makes it a lot more comfortable. We're going to move on to the next, now that we've discussed the cabin, the next issue is the time of year that you want to travel. If there's no flexibility and you have to travel during the Christmas holiday or Easter break or spring week or during the summer, you're probably going to pay top dollar because the ships are full then and they know they're going to be full. They don't have a problem getting guests on board.
But if you have some... Can I ask a question there?
Yeah, please.
If we're at wintertime in the northern hemisphere, it means it's summer in the southern hemisphere. I mean, can you go down south during our winter to their summer and the prices are just as high, kind of thing?
Well, that's a good question. That's actually a great question. Most of the cruise lines we're talking about today cater to the North American market. They're expanding dramatically. So you can go in the middle of January and sail from Chile around Cape Horn, come back up to either Rio or Buenos Aires. You're right in the middle of their summer, and you'll be paying the prices that are lower than they are at the other times of year. That is most certainly a good deal. In terms of times of year, one of the things I do want to mention is there's something called repositioning cruises. And we're speaking now in mid-September, and this is exactly when it's happening for certain ships. The Alaska season is now coming to a close. It's getting colder up there, and the ships are coming down the west coast from Alaska, and they're repositioning. Many of them are going to go through the Panama Canal. Some are going to go around Cape Horn, as I mentioned a minute ago. And there are some great values on those ships when they leave their home port for the season and they're moving to the next part of the world. So it can be transatlantic from Florida to Europe. It could be the springtime going north to Alaska, or the fall going south from Alaska. But those are great ways to get good deals by selecting the time of year. Another factor that I'm going to ask is, are you aware of onboard expenses? this should factor into a person's budget. Cruises have been positioned as all-inclusive vacations, and that's almost true. But there are some things like having to pay for, you certainly want to pay gratuities. If you want to use the spa, that's going to be an extra cost. If somebody wants to get a massage on the ship. Alcoholic beverages are included in many of the luxury cruise lines, certainly not included in the mainstream cruise lines. If you take some photos on the ship with the ship's photographer, those are extra costs, and you have to factor those in as well. Again, the luxury cruise lines, for the most part, include a lot of those things. There was a seminar that I went to in Las Vegas a couple of months ago, and the speaker was somebody from one of the luxury cruise lines. He had a very interesting expression. He said, we include gratuities, we include shore excursions, we include alcohol. He said, so when you compare the actual costs of what we charge for our superior service and what the mainstream cruise lines charge, there's not that much of a difference. And the question that I thought was very interesting is, it doesn't matter how much you pay to get on the ship. It really matters how much you have to pay to get off the ship.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
That was a very acute way of putting it.
Charles, before we go to the next one, do you get a list of what is paid and what's not paid to kind of do some comparisons if I was wanting to shop a higher end or a lower end for my budget? Do you get a little list
Sure.
of things like that?
If somebody said to me, I really enjoy a certain aspect of the ship that costs a lot of money, and I know that that's included in certain cruise lines, I would strongly recommend they go there and do that. Or another example of that, not quite answering your question, but many of the cruise lines now have drink cards where if somebody wants to have unlimited drinks, and I think they are unlimited on some of them anyway, you can buy this this drink card, and you just show the card, or there's a code on your onboard card, and you can have all the drinks you want. You don't have to pay for it. So in other words, you just pay once.
That's good. Yeah.
I just thought of another expense that would apply to some people, not others. Cruise lines are currently charging, this is going away pretty quickly, but they're currently charging for internet access. So if you're on vacation, you still want to communicate with people, which I don't recommend because it is your vacation, but if you still want to get online, you can do that, and there's a charge, and they'll sell it to you either by the minute or as a package of 75 minutes, 150 minutes, 200 minutes, and so on. If you're a member of the Cruise Lines Alumni Club, meaning you've sailed with them before, they'll give you a nice discount on that price very often. They'll give you either free minutes or discount that.
As the younger crowd is going to enter the cruising market, being on social media for them and sharing their experience is incredibly important. So it's very good that in fact the cruise lines are starting to see that and go to an unlimited standpoint, so they can share. I mean, basically, if they share their experience, other people are going to want to cruise too. So it's to their advantage to do that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's like sending an electronic postcard.
Oh yeah.
You take some pictures with your digital camera or your phone during the day, and you send them home to your friends and say, look at this glorious beach that we were on a couple of hours ago.
Yeah.
And that'll whet people's appetite.
Oh yeah.
And you're right. The age for cruisers is coming way down, and the activities, the image of cruising used to be that you sit on the deck under a blanket and sip bouillon.
I like that though. I still like that thought.
Well, that's for our generation.
Okay. Yeah. I like bouillon on the deck. I could get behind that.
So my next question will be to a prospective traveler, what's your cruise personality? Because ships, just like people, have their own personalities. I mentioned those 3 and 4 night cruises before. Carnival runs those. Carnival is called the fun ship. Lots of activities on board. If you're the kind of person who craves chamber music, or you'd like to have an enrichment lecture, or you want to hear a historian talk about the port that's coming up tomorrow that you'll be visiting so you get the most out of it, There's some ships that offer that and others that don't. So I want to make sure that my client's personality matches the ship's personality. Are they raucous? Do they want to dance? Do they like something quiet? Things like that. Next, I would probably ask who you're traveling with. If you're traveling with your family, or it's a multi-generational group that you're with, that sort of lends itself to an experience that is different from a cruise line that doesn't cater to children. So you want to make sure there's a children's program on board the ship. There's a camp. There's something that will keep the children entertained. Obviously, the first one that comes to mind is Disney Cruises or something like that. But there are a lot of cruise lines that have wonderful interactive programs, age-appropriate activities for the kids. So who you're traveling with will also be a strong influence, of course. One of the things I often do is I'll book a cabin for mom and dad on one side of the corridor over here, and this will be the outside of the ship, and they'll have a balcony and a window, and then I'll book another cabin right across the hall for the children, well, for teenagers, and that's an inside cabin, so the other inside the ship, no window.
Makes sense.
The kids can come over to mom and dad's room during the day, enjoy the view, and then they have that extra bathroom and they have the privacy in their own room in the evenings. So cruise personality. I also would like to know whether my prospective client prefers a smaller ship or a larger ship. There are some people who love the idea of being on a big ship, lots of activities. Each night at the end, after the entertainment, you come back to your cabin, your room is made up for the evening, chocolate on your pillow, and a roster of activities, a program of activities for the next day. And there are some people on the mega ships who love to see 4 pages of activities, more than you can possibly do. And there are others who say, no, I don't want to be on a ship that large. I want a mid-sized ship. And there are others who just want a small ship. Small today would be in the range of like 500 passengers. To get smaller than that, an area that is extremely popular right now is river cruising. Mm-hmm. And the river cruises, by definition in Europe, because they have to sail under these ancient low bridges, the river cruises, river cruise ships have to be much smaller, and on average will carry about 140 passengers. Much more of an intimate experience. By the second day, the crew knows your name, and you come to dinner, and the waiter will remember that you had iced tea last night, and have a glass of iced tea waiting for you, and that kind of thing. River cruises, both in the United States and in Europe, are booming right now. That's certainly one of the biggest aspects of cruising. One more distinction between large ships and small ships. Large ships have many restaurants on board. Some of them are the so-called specialty restaurants where they'll charge a fee. Most of them are included in the cost of the sailing. And some people like that. They like the idea of being able to choose a certain ethnicity of food or a certain restaurant. Others like the idea of going to the same table and the same seat every night. So that's another factor between large and small. I'd like to also ask a couple more questions, and then I'd also like to ask my clients whether they like getting dressed up at night. Some cruise lines like Cunard, that sails the North Atlantic, and other ports, their passengers love getting dressed up. The men wear tuxedos. Other cruise lines like Oceania have an atmosphere that they call country club casual, where you don't even have to put on a jacket, but a sport shirt is just fine for evening, for the so-called formal night. And those are a couple of examples. Somebody who enjoys dressing up, I'll get them on the right ship. And somebody who doesn't, I'll get them on the right ship. I also want to ask whether motion sickness is a potential problem for a guest. If it is, stay away from the North Atlantic in the middle of the winter. You don't want to sail from New York to the Caribbean in January. because passing Cape Hatteras can be rough, or going around Cape Horn can be rough. But river cruises are great, and there are certain areas where the waters are very calm. All the modern ships have stabilizers, so that's not an issue. But the objective is to make sure that the cruise is just as enjoyable as possible. And that pretty much sums it up. The only other question I would ask is about entertainment. If you really enjoy entertainment tonight, some of the cruise lines have wonderful entertainment. They actually have Broadway shows that they put on the ship in beautiful showrooms. And on the smaller ships, that's not the only entertainment venue. There are many others, dancing, the Great American Songbook. But there are other ships that will just have an intimate lounge, and that'll be the entertainment for the night. But I'd like to find out what it is that people enjoy doing after the day's work. So that sort of summarizes it. If somebody comes to me and says, gee, I'm really interested in the cruise, I don't know anything about it, I'd like to demystify it for them and take it out of the realm of, gee, it's the big unknown. Here are the options you have. Here's what happens when you get to the pier. They'll take your bags. The next time you see them, they'll be outside the door of your cabin. You're going to have a great trip. Once they give it a taste, one of the highest levels of satisfaction in all of travel. So those are some of the questions I enjoy asking people and love hearing about it when they get back from their trips.
Very cool. I have two questions. One, being single, do they have singles rooms, or do I always have to pay double like everywhere?
Another great question. The industry standard is price per person, double occupancy, which means if the price were $1,000, it would cost you $2,000, and that's not fair. I know that. There are some cruise lines, interestingly enough, the luxury cruise lines, that offer special rates for singles, where you can travel at like a 25% premium. So you pay 125% instead of 200%.
Right.
Even better news is that there are a few cruise lines that have rooms that are built specifically for singles. Norwegian Cruise Line has a relatively new ship called the Epic that has single rooms. They're small, but they did something very wise. It handles maybe about 100 passengers in the single rooms, 100 single rooms. But they have a socializing area where they serve a small continental breakfast right outside the room in that area. So all the single people can mingle and congregate and chat during the day in that social area. That is, of course, in addition to a program, something listed on the program for singles, for them to get together. But the options are to look for a ship that doesn't charge that dreaded double occupancy, single rate per person, double occupancy. So you want to look for somebody who doesn't charge that, or we look for ships that have rooms built for two. The American Queen, which two guys I know just sailed on in single rooms, I put them in single rooms. They sailed from Memphis to New Orleans, had a grand time. They came home raving about it, and they paid the single person rate. So,
excellent.
I hope that answers that question.
Yes. Another question I have, you mentioned that, if I wanted chamber music or lectures, are some of the ships kind of themed that way, like maybe science, archaeology, exploration versus just rock climbing activities and eat yourself to death?
Yeah, the ship that comes to mind is National Geographic ships, and some of the cruise lines have ships that do explorations where people really should be in good shape. This is going a tad off topic, but when I book shore excursions for people, sometimes they buy the shore excursions on their own. Sometimes they book it through me. Sometimes the shore excursions are offered by the cruise line, and sometimes they're offered by independent companies. And the independent companies also offer private tours, which means that you're not on a bus with 40 other people. But those shore excursions are labeled pretty well with the extent of stamina that's required to take the trip. So it'll say uneven pavement, many steps, long distances to walk, versus somebody who has some mobility issues where they can just get on the bus and sit back and have a tour of the city. A river cruise that I was on the Danube a couple of years ago, they did a great job, and they said everybody will see the same things, but people who are more able-bodied will see them closer up. You know, so it's one thing to see a monument from further away, and it's another to walk up and touch it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They do a good job of that. But yeah, the short answer to your question is there are some cruises that are geared to a more active lifestyle versus a more passive lifestyle.
Very cool. All right, so how do people find you, Charles?
Yeah, that's good of you to ask. I am Charlie Greenberg. My company is Your Travel Agency. I'd like people to remember me, and I'd like them to remember me by knowing that anytime they see an advertisement for a cruise line, the cruise line will always say, call us at 1-800 and then the number, or call Your Travel Agency. Now, it's my little secret. Nobody knows this, but when they say call your travel agency, they're talking about me. They want you to call me. So
what's your telephone number?
I'm Charlie Greenberg, 760-772-5888.
And an email?
760-772-5888. And I'm at greenbergcharlie@gmail.com.
Well,
Greenberg with a B-R-G. So good being with you, Peter. Thank you for hosting the show.
Actually, I'm co-hosting the show. You are the host of the show. There you go.
Sure.
All right, thanks, Charles. Well, I look forward to the next podcast. And what might it be about? Do you already know?
Yeah, I think the next podcast will be about how to choose your cruise cabin. Things I look for to help people pick the right cabin once they decide what ship they want to be on.
This is very cool.
Everybody who's watching this, thanks very much.
All right.
Hope to see you.
Thanks, Charles.
Bye.
Bye.